Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to master exactly how a floor price works in macroeconomics. We are breaking down the mechanics, the definitions, and that all-important three-mark geometric proof you need to absolutely nail minimum price legislation. Let's jump in. So, think about this for a second. What happens when the government looks at a free market price and decides, you know what, that is just way too low? Normally, we think of lower prices as a good thing, right? As consumers, we absolutely love a bargain. But take a step back. Think about the people actually making those goods. If the free market dictates that the price of a critical crop is just pennies on the dollar, the farmers growing that crop literally cannot survive. They can't pay their bills and, well, they might just stop producing altogether. When that free market equilibrium threatens the very livelihood of producers, that is when the government steps in. And that intervention brings us to our core definition, and this is the exact phrasing you'll want to lock into your memory for your exams. Minimum price legislation, which we usually just call a floor price, is defined as the minimum price legally fixed by the government at which sellers may sell a particular good or service. Now, I want you to pay really close attention to that word legally. This isn't a suggestion. It's a mandatory boundary set by the state. You cannot legally transact below this price line. Now, let's make this concept visual before we even look at a graph. Imagine you're at a circus watching acrobats high up in the air. Right beneath them is a massive, sturdy safety net. That is exactly what a price floor is like. It acts as a legal wooden platform, a structural safety net, built above the market level. Even if the natural market forces of gravity try to pull the price of a good down to the floorboards, this legal net catches it. The producer's price tag can never, ever drop below that safe boundary. It's basically a structural guarantee of a certain level of income. And this brilliantly illustrates the government's real objective here. The entire purpose of enacting this policy is to protect producers, primarily farmers. By ensuring these producers get a minimum reasonable price for their output, the government essentially removes that constant fear of market crashes. When farmers know for a fact they have a guaranteed floor price, they're highly motivated to maintain or even increase their production levels. It secures the food supply and, crucially, protects a really vital workforce. Okay, let's ground this concept in reality. Where do we actually see this happening out in our economy? Well, the most prominent real-world policy examples are agricultural goods. In India, for instance, the government fixes minimum support prices for critical crops like wheat and rice. But actually, it's not just about food. The exact same economic principle applies to human effort. Legally fixed minimum wages for labor operate exactly as a price floor in the job market. It's literally the government stepping in and saying, you cannot pay a worker less than this legal minimum for an hour of their time. All right, let's move to our coordinate plane and see how this builds step by step. This is the geometric proof you really need to master. I want you to look right at the center, to point E. This is our baseline market equilibrium. The y-axis represents price, and the x-axis represents quantity. Notice how our downward-sloping demand curve, labeled DD, perfectly intersects with our upward-sloping supply curve, labeled SS, right there at point E. In a completely free market, this intersection establishes our equilibrium price at OP0 and our equilibrium quantity at OQ0. Everyone is happy here. Quantity demanded exactly equals quantity supplied. Now, what if the government tries to help out but gets the math wrong? What happens if they set a floor price way down at OP1, which is structurally below the equilibrium price of OP0? Setting a minimum price below that natural market center actually has absolutely no effect on the market. Why? Because at that lower price of OP1, buyers want to buy way more than sellers that actually want to sell. It creates natural excess demand, specifically the gap labeled GH. And what happens when buyers are competing for limited goods? The price naturally gets pushed right back up to the equilibrium level of OP0. So that floor, completely useless. So that brings us to a crucial point, the mandatory rule. To be meaningful at all, a floor price must be fixed above the equilibrium price. Notice the horizontal line drawn up at OP2. This is our legal minimum support price. It's bolted into place above OP0. Because the law strictly states you cannot charge less than OP2, the market is physically blocked from dropping down to that natural equilibrium of E. This is what we call a true effective price floor. It forces the whole market to operate at a higher price level than it naturally would on its own. Now, what's really fascinating is the structural imbalance this whole thing creates. Let's trace the effects of this new higher price of OP2. Step 1. At this great high price, suppliers are highly motivated. They look at OP2, follow it over to their supply curve SS, and they're eager to produce and sell a massive quantity out at OQ2. But step 2, look at the consumers. At that high price of OP2, they follow the line to their demand curve DD, and they're only willing to buy a much smaller quantity, right at OQ1. Step 3 is the inevitable result. The gap between what suppliers make at OQ2 and what consumers actually buy at OQ1 creates a massive market surplus, or excess supply. In our geometric proof, this surplus is exactly equal to the distance Q1, Q2, or the line segment labeled KL. Which brings us to a rather massive problem, and the final thought I want to leave you with today. We've just proven geometrically that an effective floor price guarantees an excess supply. The farmers have produced all the way out to quantity OQ2, but everyday consumers stopped buying way back at OQ1. So if price floors legally create massive surpluses of unsold goods, who on earth is going to buy all that extra wheat? I mean, if it just rots in a field, the farmers aren't actually protected, are they? The answer lies in what the government absolutely must do after they set the price. It's this fascinating mechanism involving buffer stocks and state procurement to ensure the producers truly stay financially safe. But we're going to have to save that exact intervention for our next explainer.